Good evening. My name is John Henry, and I'm an alcoholic. In this Code Blue Big Book Action and Study seminar, we're going to go through the first 164 pages of the Big Book, the recovery section, and we're going to do the work that the first 100 people who recovered said we have to do to overcome this hopeless condition of mind and body. I borrow heavily from the Golden Slippers, from Joe and Charlie, from Clancy, and from all of the giants who have gone before me. Now, I don't claim to be any big book guru or any kind of top 10 spiritualist. I'm just a simple drunk. I was almost dead from the disease. When I finally became willing to do the action in our book, I was able to recover and have a pretty good life. So I'm hoping that there's 2s and 3s and 4s of you listening to this together. You're going to need a big book. I like the large print big book, highlighter and pen. I'm going to try to get some of the paperwork that I've got online. And please bring your willingness. Please bring your willingness and your open mind. And as you're going to see, we open every session with the set-aside prayer so that we may be more open to receiving this information. Thanks for listening. I'm John Alcoholic.
Hey, John.
During the 1950s, a man by the name of Max C., now deceased, started a group in Winnipeg, Manitoba called the Golden Slippers. The group was a back to the basics of the big book kind of group, especially for those people who could not stay sober for any length of time. The group took a bunch of chronic slippers and walked them through the steps, taking the action exactly as laid out by the first 100 men and women who wrote the basic textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not your typical thanks for sharing kind of AA meeting, nor is it like any seminar. Participants are asked to do all 12 steps as laid out in our basic textbook. One or more of the people who have done this work before will be guides to lead you through the instructions in our basic textbook using a dictionary published at about the same time as the book Alcoholics Anonymous to help us better understand the directions as they were written by the first 100 men and women. We ask every participant to commit to the entire process. Though we read and study the AA Big Book, this group is not limited to members of AA. We who have participated in these groups before have come to understand that these sessions make us much better sponsors. We can now lead people through the steps exactly as given to us by those who have gone before, unfettered and unchanged. In addition to being a boot camp for sponsors, we also feel this is especially valuable to those who have been through some sort of treatment or rehab and have been in effect left off at step 3 or 5. Recovery requires that we do all 12 steps. We recover in AA by taking the steps, and if we don't take the action as described in our basic book, we might not recover. These study and action sessions will guide you through the steps precisely as the first 100 men and women laid them down. These are back to the basic sessions, accepting the simple kit of spiritual tools that's been laid at our feet. Let's open with a set-aside prayer. God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. Amen. All right, so this is, as Todd knows, that whenever I end up doing the 4th step in these groups, that's when we tend to lose a lot of people. That's just the way it is. And that's also the case when we, at least me, when I sponsor people individually. When it comes time to do the work, it always seems the people that really need it the most are the ones that tend to disappear. So I'm glad you guys are here. And like I say, we can get all of you guys to do your 4th step. That's a big victory for me. I mean, if one I'll talk about it a little bit later, but we had one session where there were 3 of us doing the session, and we had 9 months to 2 years sober, the 3 of us that were doing it. And we started out with 10 people, and by the end we only had 1 person left, right? And this guy was the guy, he finished it and he went through with everything. And I saw him 2 years later, and he came up and gave me a big hug, and he just said, I went through that. And the guy was 55 years old when he went through it. And he said, I did the steps in Code Blue. I got sober, saved my marriage. I dumped the job that I didn't like, and I got a new job, and the promises were coming true in the guy's life. And you know what? That made it all worthwhile. I mean, that's, it's just fantastic to see that guy. So doesn't bother me. I wish more people would stick around, but I can't control things. So All right, I guess we can, let's see here. I'm really tired, so that's good that there's only 5 tonight. I can screw up and I I guess, yeah, I think I will, because you guys have been around, so I will, rather than review, I'm just going to go straight to sex. One of my, we're not going to read quite yet, but one of my sponsors said that he believed that sex should be used only for two things, right? He thought it would be for reproduction or enjoyment. And he said sex for uses other than that, he believed are not what God intended. And I didn't understand what he was talking about. Of course, I said, well, what else is there, right? Reproduction or enjoyment, isn't that all there is? And he said, oh, no, John. And he showed me that I was doing sex for many other things as well. And it seems that we tend to hurt people in the sexual arena more than any other arena. I guess maybe followed closely by money, but maybe mainly in the sexual arena. So I said, well, what else do people use sex for? And he said, well, like you, he pointed out, people use it to build their self-esteem. Right? The more you can attract the opposite sex, the better man you are, right? So I thought, right? We can also use sex to combat loneliness, right? To buy a personal relationship, right? We can also use sex for security. Now, I've been saying this for the last 4 years, and it's not just because of the election, but I said, who on earth would marry Donald Trump? I've been saying that for the last 4 years. Somebody who wants possibly money and safety, right? That's a security, could be a security instinct, right? Another reason would be for revenge. Right? I'm going to get even. They did it, so I'm going to do it, or they did something to me, I'm going to go have sex with somebody else as revenge, right? And also, people sometimes use it to force their will on another human being, right? No sex until you come around to my way of thinking. I found for me, I mainly through my life used it to build my self-esteem. And when I would cheat on people, I would think, man, I'm kind of a dirty, rotten guy, right? And during doing this process, I realized that I was a sick person, right? I was sick. Deep down, I think all of us know, what we should and shouldn't be doing with sex. A guy in his 20s, he came to me a couple of weeks ago and he said, hey, John, my sponsor told me I wasn't allowed to have any sex the first year of sobriety. Is that correct? And I said, no, that's not necessarily true. I said, you can have all the sex you want in the first year, and the second year you can have it with other people. So, all right. So let's go to the book here. So we're on page 68, right? Because we did the fear part last week. One of the last things we wrote was fear blocks us from our talents. And I just think that is so important to realize, that people are afraid, for example, to go back to school because they feel they won't measure up, right? So fear really blocks us from doing stuff that we know we should do. And fear also keeps us doing things that we know we shouldn't. So now about sex, right? We're on the bottom paragraph there. Many of us needed an overhauling there. But above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we don't have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anybody's sex conduct. So, AA, we stay out of it, right? We're going to stay out of this. We don't want to get into it. Let's highlight the next two lines. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? So they're going to give us some definite instructions here. We reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Let's highlight to the end of the paragraph. We're on page 69 of all things. Isn't it funny that all the information on sex is on page 69?
Easy to remember.
Yeah. Sorry. It's all right. Okay, we reviewed. So basically, it's the same that we're doing with our resentments and the same we're doing with our fears. We reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? That's the fourth column, right? Fourth column next to that. Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. So again, next to selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate, write fourth column. And then underneath that, write instructions. They're giving us instructions on how to do the sex part of the inventory. And I kind of group it together. I call it sex and harms, right? And I'm gonna run some of the columns so that you can see that. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for a future sex life. Highlight the next three lines. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideas and help us to live up to them. Highlight that last sentence there too. And next to it, write first sex prayer. Right? That's our first sex prayer. And so obviously when we do that, we change it around a little bit like, God, please help mold my ideals about sex, obviously, and help me live up to them, right? So that's the first sex prayer. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Underline that, nor to be despised or loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must, circle must, be willing to grow toward it. Okay, so we're going to highlight again to the bottom of the paragraph. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. Okay, so next to that line that we just highlighted, next to it write talk to sponsor. We're not going to start running out and trying to make amends without conversing with somebody, because we may be making a mistake and we might be causing more harm. I always, and this is, it's a ridiculous example, but I always use it, right? You walk across the street and you knock on your neighbor's door and the guy answers and you say, hey, I'm really sorry I did you some harm. I slept with your wife, right? We don't do that because we're going to be causing more harm. So we really need to talk to our sponsor, and we do that. We're going to discover that when we're doing our 9-step amends, that we're going to talk to our sponsor before we do anything. And we can get good advice from all kinds of people in AA about doing amends. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, okay, we're still highlighting, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. So that last little line there is the second sex prayer, right? We ask God what we should do about each specific matter. So, that's going to be like, God, what should I do in this particular situation, right? That's just another prayer. And if we take the time, and we stop before we run headlong into things, we might get a little bit, we might have a little bit more control over what we're doing. The right answer will come if we want it. God alone can judge our sex situation. Okay, before we turn the page, let's write something at the bottom. Let's write, seeking approval from others can be a drug. That's also something we have to look out for. Seeking approval from others can be a drug. What will we do? Who will we hurt? Seeking approval from others can be a drug. What will we do? Who will we hurt? Seeking approval from others can be a drug. What will we do? Who will we hurt? God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Right? So I mean, I can't think of a worse place to ask for sexual advice than in AA. Right? You're going to get a different answer from everybody. Now, I'm not talking about your sponsor who's been sober for a while, you know. But if we run around in AA and asking advice, I mean, it's just not the best thing to do. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. I mean, I sobered up at the New Hope Alano, and there were a lot of people, both men and women, coming into that club. And you know, I don't necessarily see it here at this club as much, but they were going into that club and treating it like a pickup joint, right? And they actually had an announcement at the beginning of every meeting. And I forget exactly what it was, but it's like if you've come to this club, to prey upon men or women, you've come to the wrong place. They had some little announcement that they gave at the meetings because it was so rampant. Now I had another. I told you about this tile setter whose wife had relapsed after 20 years of sobriety, and this poor woman could not get it back, and she was going up to another club, and the guy that I sell tile to was telling me that the guys there, she had her wedding ring on and they were hitting on her. And I mean, it got to the point where she couldn't go back there. I mean, that's absolutely, I couldn't believe it. It was heartbreaking to listen to this. I mean, she was a very good looking woman. She was around 50, and they would not leave her alone. And she stopped going to meetings and relapsed again. So, we do not, this is AA. We're here. We're here to get sober. Where's my little thing here? I think I read it about, let's see here. Sobriety, freedom from alcohol through the teaching and practice of the 12 steps is the sole purpose of an AA group, right? That's all we're here for. We're not going to do any of that other stuff. And I mean, if we see people doing stuff like that, I think that we should probably say something and stop it, right? It's just horrible that woman could not go to meetings without getting hit on. It was awful. To sum up about sex, okay, we're going to highlight to the next 3 lines. We earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. So next to that, we're going to write third sex prayer. Right? And again, when we say these, we change them around a little bit. It's like, God, please show me the right ideal and give me guidance in this questionable situation. God, please give me sanity and give me the strength to do the right thing. Right? So we switch it around a little bit. That's the third sex prayer. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. Underline that, the harder into helping others. And funny enough, whenever we have any problems, whenever we're thinking about drinking, we're having problems at work, anything, if we throw ourselves into helping others, these problems tend to go away. And that's been my experience, and that's what the book tells us. Highlight the next 2 sentences. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. Right? And one of my favorite lines is, when you're helping somebody, you're thinking about that sorry son of a bitch, right? Instead of this sorry son of a bitch, which is us, right? So it takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. A lot of people are scared of that word analyzed. And I mean, all that means is that we're looking at the truth about them, the truth as it really is, right? We have begun to comprehend their futility, underline futility, and their fatality, underline fatality. So that's telling us again that they're no use to us and that they might kill us. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. Highlight this next sentence. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look upon them as sick people. Okay, so next to that, we're going to write promise. That's another 4-step promise. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. You know, now again, when I was going through this, and Eric doesn't mind me telling anything about his experience, but when we were going through when he was he actually was still doing the 4-step and asking me questions, and he said, "There's no way I'm making amends to my wife. There's no way," right? And I said, "Hey, man, we're only on the 4-step. We're not even there. Don't even worry about it." And funny enough, when he went through with all of the steps, that was the first amend that he wanted to do, was run out and make amends to her. It's amazing. In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. Okay, let's highlight the next 4 lines. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. Okay, and then highlight the next, just highlight to the end. If you have already made a decision, okay, next to that, write 3rd step. And an inventory of your grosser handicaps, next to that, write 4th step. You have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. Okay, so go up 3 lines and underline grosser handicaps too, right? And then draw a little arrow, and you can write, not everything, but get the big stuff out of the way, right? I mean, we're not going to, usually on our first 4-step, or even our second, we're not going to get everything, right? But we want to get the big stuff that's keeping us sick. We want to get that out of the way, right? And we want to do that for our resentments. We want to do that for our fears. And we want to do that for the harms and the hurts that we've done other people, right? Now, we're not going to actually be taking care of some of the harms and hurts we've done other people till we get to 8 and 9. But just by sharing it with another person, it does give us relief, right? So we're going to write a few more things. Fear is the future. Fear is the future. Resentments is the past. Resentments is the past. And I just wrote this today. I was thinking, I don't even know, but I put anxiety as the present, right? And then next to all 3 of those, I wrote in parentheses, not getting my way, right? So that's I heard that from somebody speaking. So he said that fear is, one good definition is that you don't think you're going to get your way in the future, right? Resentments is you didn't get your way in the past. Right? And anxiety is, you're not getting your way right now. Right? That was just an interesting way to look at it. And let's also write, I have a deadly disease. I have a deadly disease. I must be totally honest. Right? It's telling us over and over again that we've got to be as honest as we can when we're doing the 4-step. Right? Now, there's no way that we're going to get, everything out that we should have. But boy, if we can get the big stuff out, we're going to be in a lot less danger of getting drunk. Okay, so we're going to keep writing some things here. These are just things that you can share with your sponsee, right? So what are the grosser handicaps? Question mark. What are the grosser handicaps that they're talking about? A, resentment. B, fear. C, guilt. D, remorse. What are the grosser handicaps? Resentment, fear, guilt, and remorse. And that's what we're dealing with in the 4-step. What are the basic character defects that we looked at as the basic cause? I know that's a mouthful, but write it down. What are the basic character defects that we looked at as the basic cause? And that's simply the 4th column, right? So you can, 1, selfish, 2, dishonest, 3, self-seeking, 4, frightened, 5, inconsiderate. And funny enough, from these stem all defects of character. So again, what are the grosser handicaps? Resentment, fear, guilt, remorse. What are the basic character defects that we looked at as the basic cause? 1, selfish, 2, dishonest, 3, self-seeking, 4, frightened, 5, inconsiderate. From these stem all defects of character.
Can you say those 5 again?
Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate. And guys, I mean, all that is essentially is that's our 4th column on all of our sheets. And we discovered that all of our character defects, all of them, stem from those 5. So, let's see here. Where am I?
And then you had a little something under that from...
From these stem all defects of character.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So, one thing, and I see this a lot, I've only been around for 5.5 years, but actually, I've only been doing the work for like 4.5 years, but I said one of the tragedies I see is people, they're sitting around in AA, they're waiting until they get better so they can do their 4-step perfectly. We can't do that. We've got to get rid of our grosser handicaps now, right? We're going to be, you're going to discover when we get to steps 10 and 11 that we're going to be inventorying for the rest of our lives, right, through 10 and 11. But we've got to get rid of the major things right now that are going to kill us. And one of my sponsors taught me that there's no emotional problem that I've ever had or that I'll ever have in the future that doesn't revolve around one of the following things. I'm either madder than hell, I'm scared to death, or I've done something I shouldn't have done, and I'm eaten up with guilt, shame, and remorse. That's what we're dealing with in the 4-step, right? That's what we're trying to get rid of. And when we do that, we're going to be in much less chance of getting drunk.
Could you go through the 5 once again? Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking.
Frightened and inconsiderate. Yep, it's just all it is. It's the 4th column on all of our sheets.
Okay.
But it's just nice to have it in the book. Nice to have it written down in the book. All right.
Is there a pen in there? I don't...
Okay, so in the 4-step, we're going to find these things that block us off from God, right? We're going to find what they are. In the 5th step, we're going to talk about them with another human being and with God. In the 6th step, we're going to become willing to turn them loose. In the 7th step, we're going to ask God to remove them. We already have our list for the 8th step, right? For me, just about everybody on my resentment list was on my 8th step list, and of course everybody on my sex and harms as well. So we've got the list for 8, and we're going to clean up the wreckage in 9. So we cannot go forward in the action steps if we don't do this 4-step. And people run away. They're afraid. They don't do it. And of course, they don't do it, they don't change. And if they don't change, they drink again. And it's just that simple. Okay, so I am going to run a few more columns here. And I mean, this is, does anybody have a resentment that they have that I'll put it up here, and if it's one that I have, I'll run it. Otherwise, because again, it's just so important. You got those lists, and when we do it, I am resentful at, write them all down. The cause in about 6 words, right? Then we work our way across the list using this definition list. It's so important to have this list of definitions because, again, this tells us about the basic instincts of life, right? The social instinct, the security instinct, and the sex instinct. Threats against those are why we get angry. Threats against those basic instincts are why we have fear. Threats against those instincts are why we step on the toes of other people. So that's why these definition sheets are so doggone important. I'm going to run a few columns on some harms that I did. The first one I'm going to talk about is a gal named Karen. Karen, yeah. So Karen, I knew her in the mid to late 90s. And whenever I was out drinking and doing cocaine, if something better didn't come along, I would call her up in the middle of the night and say, hey, can I come over, right? So I used her as booty call, right? So this is all the same. So this one would read, who did I harm? Well, I harmed Karen, right? What did I do? Well, I used her for sex, right? To put it bluntly, that's what happened, right? So let's look at my social instinct. How did using her for sex affect my social instinct here? Your natural tendencies or feelings from birth having to do with people as a group with interests in common. Self-esteem, what we think of ourselves, low or high. That can be positive or negative, right? It was positive because she always said yes. She wasn't that good looking, so it was also a little bit of a negative, right? I mean, that's the way it was. So that affected my self-esteem both ways, if you can believe it. Personal relationships. So how did this affect my relations with other human beings and the world around us? Involves a third party. For one thing, I didn't like to talk about her, right? I tried to keep her hidden from other people, right? So I wasn't honest with people, but it also affected my personal relationships with people I worked with because she wanted more than me showing up in the middle of the night, and she would bust into where I drank, my bars, and she would also show up at my place of business. So that affected a lot of my personal relationships with other people. And I always tried to hide it from everybody. How did that affect my security instinct, right? Your natural tendencies, or where am I here? Your natural tendencies or feelings of safety, freedom from danger or harm. Wanting money, property, clothing, housing, vehicles, etc. in order to be secure. I don't know if it affected my security instinct. I will say that, I did help her out with drugs and money. But I don't think it affected my security instinct. Now, my emotional instinct, based on our need for another person or persons, some people tend to dominate and some are overly dependent on others. That affected my emotional, having her there. And it really affected my sex instinct, your natural tendencies regarding sex. Acceptable sex relations, our sex lives as accepted by society, God's principles, our own principles. Well, because I always had her, some other relationships that perhaps I could have gone further with, I did not go further with, right? Because I always had Karen in my pocket, right? So that affected that. Hidden sex relations, our sex lives that are contrary to society, God's principle. Well, that whole situation with Karen, I was hiding it from everybody, right? And I had girlfriends throughout the time when I was seeing her as well. So that affected that too. Ambitions, your plans or desires. Social ambitions, your plans to gain acceptance, power, recognition, prestige. Maybe, maybe not. Security ambitions, your plans to gain material wealth. It didn't help that she was busting in at my place of business. That caused me some anxiety, but I'm not going to check it. Having this relationship with her did affect my sexual ambitions. Your plans regarding your sex lives, either acceptable or hidden. Again, I always had Karen, so I didn't necessarily work on other relationships that might have actually had a chance of becoming something further in my life. So now let's go to my part in this, the exact nature of my wrongs, right? Very accurate, methodical, correct nature, the essential characteristic of a thing. wrong, acting, judging, or believing incorrectly, fault, something done wrongly, an error, mistake. Mistake, to understand or perceive wrongly. Defect, lack of something necessary for completeness. Same as shortcoming. So selfish, strictly material, property, money, housing, clothing, vehicles, etc. I'm not going to check that one. Dishonest. You can either commit a lie or not say something. I was very dishonest with her because I would tell her what she wanted to hear and I wouldn't tell her what she didn't want to hear. So I was very dishonest with her. Was I self-seeking? What I want matters more than what she wanted. My needs matter more than hers. My feelings. If she ever called me, I didn't pick up the phone. I only called her when I was doing drugs and alcohol and I wanted sex. So you bet I was self-seeking. Frightened, fear of not being accepted, fear of my wants, needs, feelings not being met. Once in a great while, she would say no. So I was, I guess, a little bit fear there. But I was also frightened of her coming into places where I drank and where I worked. So there was a lot of fear with her. Inconsiderate. Did I fail to consider how she felt? Her wants, her needs? You bet I did. I didn't give a damn. I wanted what I wanted. Now, she was a cocaine addict and an alcoholic just like me. So I can only hope that somewhere she's doing this right now and I'm on there too. I use John for sex and drugs and money. So, who knows? I don't know is the case. I haven't seen her in maybe 12 years. So, but I hope that somewhere she's sober and maybe if she is, she probably feels that she harmed me as well. So let's do another one here. I'm going to do another one. In the mid-90s, I was working for this company, and I had a rather large cocaine debt to this mean drug dealer. So what I ended up doing was stealing from merchandise from this company that I worked for, okay, so I could keep this guy from beating the hell out of me, right, to put it bluntly. So I stole from a company that I was working for. So this one, man, woo, this was bad. Social instinct, your natural tendencies or feelings from birth having to do with people as a group, interests in common. Self-esteem, what we think of ourselves, high or low. I felt just horrible. Put a big negative next to my self-esteem. Personal relationships, our relations with other human beings and the world around us, involves a third party. So it does not involve the guy, right? So yes, that affected all my personal relationships because I was so guilty. The owners of the company and the people I worked with, I was evasive, I was hiding, I wasn't myself. It affected all of and even the people that weren't involved with the company. I was hiding this and I wasn't forthcoming. It was just horrible. It affected all my personal relationships. My security instinct, right? Your natural tendencies or feelings of safety, freedom, danger, harm. Material, wanting money, property, clothing, housing. You bet. If I get caught, I'm fired. You bet. It affected my material instinct. Absolutely. My emotional instinct, based on our need for another person or persons. Absolutely. These my friends that I worked with, and all of a sudden I couldn't rely on them because I couldn't communicate with them. Sex instinct. Acceptable sex relations. Our sex lives is accepted by society, God's principle of our own. I got to tell you guys, I had this rolling around in my head, all of this fear and this guilt and this shame and this remorse at what I did. Nobody wanted to go on a date with John. You bet it affected my sexual relations. Ambitions, your social ambitions, your plan to gain acceptance, power, recognition, prestige. Of course it affected that. My security ambitions, your plans to gain material wealth. How am I going to ask these people to promote me, or do something when I had done this? It affected all of my ambitions for the future, all of them. What was my part in this, right? I'm going to skip all the exact nature wrong definitions. I'm going to go straight to selfish. Strictly material, property, money, housing, clothing. You bet I was selfish. I was stealing. Dishonest. You bet I was dishonest. I was lying about it. I don't know what happened to that inventory, man. I got no clue. Self-seeking. What I want matters more than what you want. Of course. I was worried about John, man. John, I don't want to get the hell beat out of me. Frightened. I was terrified as long as I worked there, I was terrified. Inconsiderate. Did I fail to consider how they felt, their wants, their needs, how I affected? Of course I was, man. So yeah, all of these things, the exact nature of my wrongs. Right? That was just a really bad situation. And I knew the difference between right and wrong, but I put myself in a situation where I felt I had to violate my morals, and I did, right? And I did. I'm going to do one more. This one actually happened when I was in high school. I was in a fist fight with my brother, and my mom tried to break us up, and I broke her wrist. When I was throwing a punch, and I broke her wrist, right? So, mom, broke wrist. Social instinct, self-esteem. Oh my God, it was horrible, right? How did that affect my personal relationships? Again, personal relationships are relations with other human beings in the world around us. Involves a third party, so not my mom. Well, it affected all of my personal relationships because I was so horrified at what I did. And again, I didn't want anybody to know about it. Security instinct, wanting money, property, clothing. Well, I didn't get my allowance, I'll tell you that.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So how were you resentful at your mom if you were the one who broke her wrist?
Well, no. This is harms. This is harms. Yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
Gotcha.
No, so and funny enough, all these sheets are exactly the same, right? They're exactly the same. So right now I'm just doing the harms.
Gotcha.
Yep. So sex instinct. Again, I got a date with a girl, my mom's wearing a cast. It affected all of these things, right? The exact nature of my wrongs. I lied about it to people. I was fearful that people were going to find out. I was fearful that I was going to have repercussions. And I was inconsiderate because I wanted to land that punch on my brother, and I didn't care who got in the way, right? So the exact nature of my wrongs. So those are just three. Now, I will tell you that the theft that I did, that company is no longer in the same form. There's nobody that I could make amends to for that one. So what I ended up doing is giving probably double what I stole to charity and people that needed. That's how I handled that one because there's no way that I could get back. Karen, I don't know where she is. And I did make them, my mom died before I sobered up, but she knew that I was very sorry about that one too. But these are just three things. So we want to get all of these, get them on paper, man, and look at this definition sheet, right? So again, resent, and the big one is our anger, right? And if you guys haven't done anything, I tell everybody that just give me 10, 10, and 10, right? So if you can just, I had like 150 resentments, I had about 96 fears, and I had so many harms and everything, I couldn't count them. But people that don't want to do this, just get me 10 resentments, right? I am resentful at my spouse or whatever. I'm resentful at my boss. I'm resentful at... Get me 10 resentments, get me 10 fears, and get me 10 harms. If you can just do 10, 10, and 10, the grosser handicaps, that's better than doing nothing, right? Obviously, I want everybody to do the best that they can on this, because this is where the magic happened for me. And if you do the 4-step this way, there's more than one way. There's many ways to do the 4-step, I guess. But when we do it this way, we do most of the work ourselves, right? And usually it only takes about 2 hours to do a 5th step. There's another way to do it where what you do is you just kind of write some little things to jog your memory, and then you end up talking about them with your sponsor. That you could infringe upon your sponsor for a whole day or 2 days, right? This way we do most of the work ourselves, and really I found that I've done 2 4-steps or 2 5th steps, and each one was only about 2 hours. So. All right, so does anybody have any questions on any of this stuff at all? All right, I'm just going to kind of do a quick review, and then we're going to cover this guidelines thing here, which I didn't understand at all. But all right, so let's see here. Let's see. Okay. So again, just a little bit of review here, right? A little bit of review. I discovered, we're looking at our wrongs, right? And I discovered that a good definition of resentment is incorrect judgment of others. I discovered that most of my resentments were wrong, right? Most of my fears were incorrect perceptions of situations, right? I'm not talking about fear of not running out in the middle of the street. That's just common sense. I'm talking about my fears that I'm fear of failure, fear of success, fear of relationships, things of that nature. And most of the harms and the hurts that I did were incorrect treatments of others. So a resentment is when we re-feel something, right? If my boss yells at me, that's a wrong on his part, and I have every right to be angry. But when I go into the next room and I relive it, that becomes a resentment at that point. And I get home from work that night and I'm still reliving that resentment. It blocks me off from doing things that I should do. And I've discovered that I am not honest with myself, and every time I relive a resentment, what the person did gets a little bit worse, what I did gets a little bit less, and the harm they did me becomes a little bit deeper. And if I can play these resentments over and over again, I was standing there doing nothing when they came along, right? These are tools that I needed to have in order to be a successful alcoholic for 25 years, right? Because I had to be able to blame other people. So we look at these, we got to look at them from a different angle, not what the people did to me, but what the resentment is doing to me, right? And then later I can look at what I ended up doing to get this whole thing started, right? We discovered that these resentments come from where they come from. They come from when people threaten one of my basic instincts of life. They threaten my social instinct. That's my status in the community. I'm going to get pissed. They threaten my security instinct, what I need to feel safe and secure. I'm going to get pissed. They threaten my sexual instinct, my desire to be with the opposite sex. I am going to be pissed when they threaten that too. So if we get them on paper, I'm telling you, we run these columns, 95% of these resentments are going to disappear because they're so doggone stupid and we realize it. The other 5% that are so deeply ingrained, we're going to get help from our sponsor and God, and we're going to use the ultimate tour. We're going to pray. We're going to pray for these people, right? And what about justified resentments? People ask me about, well, I have every right to do this. This happened to me when I was a kid, right? Well, justified resentments are going to kill us. They're going to make us drink just as much as the unjustified ones. So we still have to pray for these people. And that doesn't mean we approve of what they did at all. It just means that we're done letting them control and dominate us. We want them the heck out of our head. Fears. I learned that all of my fears were caused by one of the following. I'm not going to get something I want. I'm going to lose something I've already got. I've done something to another human being I shouldn't have done. And I'm worried that they're going to catch me at it, right? Those are the fears. Let's see here. So we got to get them on paper because we can only see one resentment at a time. We can only see one fear at a time. Just by doing the 4th step according to the book, we're going to realize some things. We're going to see how many resentments and fears we have. We're going to see how they block us off from God. We're going to see that it's not the people we resented, but rather what they did to us that we resent. We're going to see that it's not even what they did to us, but it's how we react to a threat against one of our basic instincts that pisses us off or makes us afraid. We're going to see that resentments and fears are a waste of time. They paralyze us from doing anything worthwhile. They never did us any good. They never straightened out any relationships. They never made us any money. Resentments, fears, they never made us feel better, only worse. They block us off from God. We don't feel good. We become insane. We start to think about taking a drink and we end up drunk all over again. Right? We saw how people and fears have controlled and dominated us through our lives. We see how stupid most of the resentments and fears are, and 95% of them disappear. The other 5%, through prayer and work with sponsored therapy, we get rid of it. Now, the amazing thing, I thought that if I did this, I didn't think I was a real person to begin with, but I thought I would lose all my personality when I did this thing. But God will not let us have any more holes in our head, so He replaces these with the opposite. Where I had resentment, He gives me serenity, peace of mind, happiness, compassion, love, and goodwill to my fellow man. Right? And we're not even at the 5th step yet. Where I had fear, He gives me faith and courage. Right? One of my favorite prayers, God, remove my fear and show me what you would have me be. Right? It tells us that at once we commence to outgrow fear. I know when I'm doing this, I no longer say that if they hadn't done that to me, I wouldn't have to be the way I am today. I'm no longer a victim. We do not have a place for victimhood in AA. We're all adults, and what happened to us in the past does not have to control what we do today. What are we going to do today to fix this, right? Perhaps we can see that people we're afraid of and people who've harmed us aren't bad people, they're only sick people. Perhaps we can straighten out some relationships while these people are still alive. After these people are dead, my parents, they never got to see me sober. Once they're dead, it's too late. Right? Now, if we pray for these people that have harmed us, it doesn't mean we're going to take them hand in hand and skip down the path of life. It doesn't mean we approve of what they did to us. It just means we're going to get rid of the fear and anger that controls us, right? When we did the sex part, we saw that we use sex for things other than the sex instinct. To build self-esteem, to combat loneliness, for security, for revenge. When we do this, we lose the desire to use sex for these things. We saw what we did to start many of these things in motion and why people retaliate against us. We see what our wrongs are, right? Our resentments, our fears, and the harms. We see the exact nature of them. That 4th column, the dishonesty, the selfishness, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate. Now I discovered maybe if I can be a little bit less, I'll never be close to perfect, but if I can be a little less selfish, a little less dishonest, a little less self-seeking, fearful, and inconsiderate, I will not have to hurt and harm other people. They won't have to retaliate against me, and I won't have to fear and resent. Right? We are now all set to do our 5th step. We know the nature of our wrongs to talk about in step 5. The defects of character we're going to become ready to have God remove in 6. The shortcomings we're going to ask Him to remove in 7. And we got the list of names for 8 and 9. This is not scary. And again, when we do this, God is starting to give me a kindly and tolerant view of people, remove my fears, and show me what He would have me be. Right? The guilt, shame, and remorse starts to be replaced with good conscience, peace, serenity, happiness, and goodwill towards my fellow man. So I tell everybody, man, don't sit around in AA waiting till you get better so you can do your 4th step. Right? We get rid of these things now. This is how we get better. If we don't do this, we might get drunk. Right? And the reason for that is a person whose mind is filled with resentment, a person whose mind is filled with fear, a person whose mind is filled with guilt, shame, and remorse does not feel good. And eventually, searching for a way to feel better, we begin to remember the ease and comfort that comes by taking a couple of drinks. Next thing you know, we think we can get drunk, and we get drunk all over again. So we got to do something about these resentments, these fears, this guilt, shame, and remorse right now in order to have peace of mind, serenity, happiness for good long-term sobriety. That's how we do it. Now, this thing right here, these guidelines, I'm going to cover this real quick and we'll be done for the day. I didn't understand this at all, but they want us to write out 12 summaries, right? So the way we run these columns, these summaries, they want us to go backwards, right? So they want us to do three in our resentments, they want us to pick one of our resentments where the major character defect was selfishness, and they want us to go backwards, right? So we label the top of the paper with the defect of character from column 4, selfishness. Then we label resentment, fear, or harm, and then we give the description. We talk about how it affects our basic instincts in column 2. We state how that specific defect of character affected each column that was checked. I'm just going to read these.
Two of these examples, to be honest with you, aren't very good, but one's good. So this one is a selfish resentment. So the person selected a resentment where the major character defect was selfish, and then they listed because of my selfishness, and they talked about each one of these things that they checked here, right? So it says, I am resentful at the city of Minneapolis, Bill B. and Dave A. The cause of my resentment is I had to fight to get a promotion that I felt I was clearly deserving of because of my seniority and qualifications. It didn't matter who I harmed along the way. What did seem to matter was the money, less work, more power, and me getting my way. Right? So this guy thought he deserved it, and he was very selfish. He wanted it. Because of my selfishness, my self-esteem was affected because I wasn't willing to understand why they had a problem seeing I was best for the job. So his self-esteem was affected because he thought he was the best. He couldn't see that he wasn't. Because of my selfishness, my personal relationships were affected because I felt forced to step on some toes to get what I wanted. Because of my selfishness, my material security was affected because I thought I may have advanced faster or further had these things happened sooner on my terms. Because of my selfishness, my emotions are affected because of the bad feelings I feel for these people. Because of my selfishness, my social ambitions may have been harmed because I can't or don't trust myself at social events where I know they will be for fear of what I may say or do. So this guy couldn't control his emotional nature. Because of my selfishness, my future security was affected due to the loss of money which I felt may hamper my ambitions. My retirement fund and my wages are mainly what I thought would have been affected. No matter what their part was, I took selfishness to an extreme. It was an obsession that helped create the resentment and emotions. Had I been less selfish, I may have been able to handle the situation differently with the same or better results. I would have been able to let go and move on. I mean, that's like last week when I talked about my boss getting those big bonus checks and how pissed off I got. That was my selfishness running to an extreme, and that affected all of these things, right? So let's go to the next one here. Selfish fear. I am fearful. So again, the defect of character is selfish, and this is out of her fear inventory. I am fearful of bankruptcy. The cause of this fear is my staying home with the girls and my husband not making enough money. So she's afraid that her husband don't make enough money, right? She's afraid they're going to run out of money. Because of my selfishness, my self-esteem is affected because I think I can't buy and do things I'd like to for my family. I feel less than. So she doesn't have enough. A lot of her self-worth is built up on how much money they have. Because of my selfishness, my personal relationships are affected because all I talk about is my lack of money. So she's out with her girlfriends and she's like, my husband doesn't make enough money. I can't do this. I can't do that. Nobody wants to be around her, right? So therefore, I feel unable to do a lot with my friends. Because of my selfishness, my material security is affected because all I look at is what I think I can't do or can't have because of no money. Because of my selfishness, my security ambition is affected because I don't feel financially stable. Because of my selfishness, no matter how much money my husband made, it wouldn't be enough. I wanted more. I lost sight of faith in God that He would provide what was needed. Okay, so we're just writing out a little sheet of paper. This last one is the best one. This is selfish harm. So because of this woman's selfishness, she harmed somebody here. I harmed an old boyfriend, Rob. I feel that I harmed him because I stayed in the relationship for a year after I lost interest in him. She stayed in a relationship for a year after she wasn't interested. I had put a lot of money I had earned into the relationship. He kept assuring me that it wouldn't be long before he could pay me back and give me more than I could have on my own. I felt justified in staying with him, waiting for what I felt I had coming. My plan was to leave once I was paid back. So she's sticking around. She wants to get her money back from him. Because of my relationship, my self-esteem was affected because I felt I was better than Rob. I felt I had put more into the relationship than he had. I felt I was too good for him. Because of my selfishness, my personal relationships were affected because I gossiped to my friends and family about what a loser he was. She's out with everybody saying, that guy is a loser, but I got to stay with him because he owes me money. Right? They in turn tried to talk me into leaving, which I had no intention of doing until I was paid back. This caused tension in my relationships with my family. I mean, her parents are like, get the hell out of the relationship. Because of my selfishness, my material security instinct was threatened because I thought if I left, when emotionally the relationship was over, I wouldn't get my money and I would start over with nothing. Because of my selfishness, my emotional security instinct was threatened because I was depending on him to pay me back. I wasn't working toward any arrangements for him to pay me back. I thought I needed to keep him emotionally locked into the relationship in order to get my money. We took turns emotionally dominating the relationship. Because of my selfishness, my acceptable sex relations were affected because I had trouble having any sexual relations with him once my feelings had changed. Because of my selfishness, my hidden sex relations were affected because once my feelings for him had changed, I began to find that I was interested in other men. I flirted with them and led them on. I wanted to know that once I was single again, I could find men who would be interested in me. Because of my selfishness, my security ambitions were affected because I wanted to make sure I got the money I needed to get an apartment and other things I wanted to get started in my life without him. Because of my selfishness, my sexual ambitions were affected because I had to put them on hold until I got my money. I had no sexual ambitions with Rob. I took selfishness to an extreme. Rob's part could have changed if I hadn't been selfish. I didn't have to give him the money in the first place. My selfishness got in the way. Because I believed I would get more later if I paid then. Had I been less selfish, I would have kept the financial situation separate from the emotional. Instead, I used his feelings for me and was dishonest about my feelings for him to ensure payment. So this poor gal really screwed herself because she wanted her money back. She screwed all aspects of her life here. Selfishness to an extreme. So all they're asking us to do is write out a simple page just so we kind of understand it and you can cover it with your sponsor. So do what you can, man. Do what you can and schedule your fifth step for any time between next Tuesday and the Tuesday after. So you've got a week to finish it, but schedule it for between Tuesday to Tuesday. Next week we're going to talk about the fifth step, and after we talk about the fifth step, you guys should be doing your fifth step with your sponsor, right? So if you don't have a sponsor or you don't have somebody to hear it, we'll find you somebody, but I trust everybody does. So any other questions? And again, I didn't really understand all of this. I just did it to the best of my ability, and it worked, man. It worked. And what was really cool, the sponsor they assigned me, I did it with him. And then another guy that was sober for 10 years, I did a second fifth step with him about 6 months after my first one, and I cleaned up everything I missed. And I mean, it was an absolute miracle. I lost my obsession thinking about booze and drugs somewhere in the midst of this deal right here, and I stopped waking up angry in the midst of this stuff here. So this really does work. So. Any questions? Yes.
So with the fourth step, obviously we're doing an inventory of ourselves.
Yep.
Do we share the worksheets with our sponsor?
Sure. Yep, you bet. Bring them. And I'll talk about that next week. I'm going to kind of tell you how I did it, or how he had me do it, I should say. But you bet, we're going to share our worksheets. But that's why it's nice to take the extreme examples and write out a half a page about them, because those are the big ones that we want to talk about. The ones, if you got something, right, if you got a resentment, and every single one of these babies is checked and all of these are checked, yeah, let's write a little page about that one, right? Because once we talk about it, we get it out, and then hopefully our sponsor is going to help us see something that we can't see. But we'll talk about that next week. But absolutely share the worksheets and the summaries. And I'll talk about again. I'll talk about what they had me do, and we've got all kinds of other paperwork for the fifth step that I'll give you next week. And it's not only for you to look at, but it's also for you to look at when you're listening to other people's fourth steps. I think that I learn more from hearing fifth steps of other people than I did. I did this, but you keep learning, and oh my God, that you just, when you listen to other people, you look at yourself even deeper. So, anything else to that? All right, let's end with the third step prayer. Schedule your fifth step for between next week from Tuesday and the Tuesday after. Even if you're not done, go with what you got, right? God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Peace.
Peace.